Hello everyone, I just wanted to come on and give you an update to the situation unfolding here in Australia. And unfortunately I don't have any good news for you at this stage, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, the situation has got far worse than it was on the last reports that I gave you.
Sydney's biggest water supply choked by smoke. Every corner of the Warragamba Dam under threat as fire takes over the Blue Mountains.
Further west in the tiny town of Tottenham, a dust twister. The elements out of control, a heat map painting a concerning picture for Australia and the state.
Australia is under a state of emergency as hundreds of wildfires burn across the country right now. Those fires have ripped through towns and destroyed dozens of homes, and of course this is just before Christmas.
Brace for catastrophic conditions as an extreme heat wave hits Sydney. Temperatures will climb well into the 40s in the coming days, peaking on New Year's Eve and making conditions even worse on our fire grounds.
As a meteorologist and someone who's studied this my whole life, I couldn't have even believed that could have happened. To give you an idea, they're saying that even right now, this is likely a 1 in 1,000 year event. To give you an idea of how unprecedented this is.
The fires now in Australia are covering an area around about 5 million hectares burned. That's around about 12.5 million acres. To put that in comparison, that is about the size, or it's a greater area than the country of Wales. It's about the size of Belgium and Luxembourg combined, almost as big as the country of Ireland. Coming with the fires is a smoke plume which is leaving this country and taking out across the world, hitting New Zealand very drastically. That smoke plume is estimated to be something in the vicinity of 5.5 million square kilometres. That's around about 2.1 million square miles. As I said, folks, the situation here in Australia is quite literally unprecedented. When you look at the news reports, they will tell you that Australia teeters on the brink of a humanitarian crisis. I would suggest no, folks, it is in the midst of an unfolding humanitarian crisis as we speak. If you just have a look at some of these news reports, I'll just go through some of them. And the situation here is quite literally unprecedented, ladies and gentlemen. The size and scope of these fires and the inability of people to be able to deal with them is like nothing we've ever seen. And the efforts that government is making is truly ridiculous. You know, they're really not putting enough effort into it at all. As you can see here, that's the bushfire map, and we're told that it's a potential, it's on the brink of a humanitarian crisis. Folks, it's already a humanitarian crisis. We've got fires all around the country, fires now in Western Australia as well, and some of the reports are just, outrageous. It happens so fast. We put the children, put everybody in the water as the bushfire was coming. This happened in a lot of places, Conjola Creek. It also happened at Mallacoota. Bateman's Bay, the same thing. We saw whole towns devastated, ladies and gentlemen. Here is an interesting report. 4,000 people trapped on the town's waterfront, and this is at Mallacoota. It says it down here. Yeah, Mallacoota, there are around 4,000 residents fled towards the waterside, so they're trapped on the beach. And here we have the Defence Force set to rescue 500 people in Mallacoota. That's comforting for them, isn't it? And here we have reports that at least 17 people are missing. I think that number is set to rise dramatically, ladies and gentlemen. And as I said, they're saying that this is a crisis that is on the brink of happening. Here we have the fires are like nothing we've ever seen, 5 million hectares, and it has basically, as I said folks, we've not seen anything like this. Basically in the history of the world there have not been any fires like this. You can look at the live map of the fires. I'll put a link below so you can see just how much it is devastating the country. These maps are updated every 10 minutes. You can see here the size of the fires that are surrounding Sydney. And again, no rainfall. An interesting thing as well that's happening with that, the lack of rainfall. As I mentioned to you before, the amount of Doppler radar stations around the Earth and the concept that these things are controlling the weather and pushing the clouds away. If you have a look at this radar image, very predictable folks. We see rain out to sea here, quite heavy patches of rain, but it all stops in a nice round circle around the Doppler radar. That's the way it goes folks. They're controlling the weather. As I said, this is reaching New Zealand as well. This is what the glaciers are looking like in New Zealand because of the smoke plume coming from Australia. It's doing a lot of damage already to other countries, and you know, it's our fires here, and it's just devastating folks. There's plenty of pictures to show you the extent of the devastation. You just got to look on Google Images. They're all over the place. It's really like nothing we've ever seen before. So big that we're told it's even generating its own weather systems, if such a thing is even possible. Pyrocumulonimbus clouds, we're told, are being formed. I can understand pyro clouds being formed. How they could produce rain, to me, seems a little avant-garde, but hey, that's what we're being told. You can believe it if you want to, folks, but that just shows the extent of the situation here in Australia. And as I said, the smoke plume that's leaving is absolutely outrageous. The smoke plume is actually wider than Europe, ladies and gentlemen. And I'll just show you this video here so you can check it out for yourself. As you can see there, that is the size of the smoke plume. There it is in comparison to the size of Europe. There it is in comparison to the size of the United States. There it is in comparison to the size of South America. This is a pretty large smoke plume, ladies and gentlemen. Now the reason this is happening, you know, I showed you on a video last week or a couple of weeks ago. I've done a couple of videos in the last week. I'll just run through this here so you can see it. I showed you on that video the floodplain harvesting that is going on. Sorry about this. This is just what I deal with here with buffering, ladies and gentlemen. I can set the videos up to play, but I still get this buffering problem. The floodplain harvesting that's happening and the private dams that have been built, this is one of the main problems that we've got here. This is why the country is so dry. I mean, if you look at some of the news reports that I just went through, and I'll put the links to those reports below so you can look at them for yourself. They talk about the water shortage and the crisis, how there's this major water crisis in Australia. And really, it's because of this. It's because of the floodplain harvesting, and it's because of the private dams that have been built. These dams that I talked about on the last couple of reports that I've done. Again, you'll find the links below. Now, all of this sort of stuff is what has contributed to this situation, folks. And if you want to know how they've gotten away with doing this and how they've gotten away with selling off our water, I just want to show you this report here that was put out by our friends on the channel, Liabilitymate. They really do good work, folks. And if you haven't subscribed to that channel yet, I highly recommend that you do if you're an Australian, because they are keeping us informed about what's going on the ground here. But have a listen to this report coming from Liabilitymate, and it's referring to an interview that was conducted by Alan Jones. Have a listen to this. This is how they've managed to sell our water, folks, and tell me what you think about this. This is Australian politicians for you.
That you asked the Premier of New South Wales in Parliament this week, last week, Gladys Berejiklian, whether Parliamentarians shouldn't have to disclose their water ownership. And you asked, basically, the Premier, given the New South Wales water crisis, your words, and current investigations into water trading and water corruption, will the Premier explain why state members of Parliament don't have to declare their water ownership before...
Water ownership. Members of Parliament don't have to declare their water ownership. How are members of Parliament even in a position where they are owning water? Think about that, folks. But I'll continue.
Before you ask that question, coming to Peter, likewise, there are federal parliamentarians, I'm told, who own water.
And it wouldn't be specific on their disclosures that they would have to own up to a water right. I have to say, I have concerns that some recently departed federal MPs, and probably some still in the Parliament, own water.
And that's your concern, Helen?
Absolutely.
Because you were up front, you say I own water.
That's right, I did. And when I saw the form to fill in, when I joined Parliament, I just thought, there was no obligation to actually disclose my water interests at all.
And the Premier didn't answer your question?
No, she said that, well, basically she said that we should trust politicians.
Yes, you said the water market, you've said, is an unregulated disgrace. We know there are people who have an interest in keeping water scarce and prices high. They're making millions off the misery of drought-stricken farmers.
Absolutely.
I don't know, and Peter doesn't know, which of these politicians own water. Then you've got these private water holders, this Duxton Water, who own enough water to fill a warren or a dam.
That's right.
They don't own a tablecloth of land.
That's right. And, of course, all the foreign interests too. So we know a lot of that water is, a lot of land and water is owned by foreign entities, corporations, and that's a big concern.
You also raise this question of the manufacture of Bellamy's, being the sale of it being approved to a Chinese company. And you said this is a long sequence of events, the sale of important Australian assets to overseas investors. And you gave a speech on how government is, quote, making decisions about foreign purchases in secrecy. And you said the coalition in the last 30 years have successfully portrayed themselves as strong at protecting our borders, strong at putting Australian interests ahead of those of foreigners. But then you said this, but protecting our borders should be about more than just stopping sick refugee children from presenting at Australian hospitals. It means protecting Australian land, Australian jobs, Australian water, Australian farms, Australian heritage, and the Australian way of life. Absolutely. On that score, the coalition's failed.
Absolutely. So
how many people in the Parliament and the Chamber when you made this speech?
Probably about 3 or 4.
And no reaction?
No, well, I think that, you know...
But in the electorate, what's the reaction?
A lot, absolutely. So we put it up on the Facebook and people are tuning in on it, and it's been shared, I don't know how many times, but it's certainly resonating within the community. And also outside of the electorate of Murray too. I get a lot of people coming in and commenting about what's happening. People are fed up, absolutely. And we're in a lot of trouble.
Talking about...
We're in a lot of trouble. As she said, we are in a lot of trouble. This is treason, ladies and gentlemen, what these politicians have done. And it isn't just treason against the people of Australia, it's treason against Australia itself. Because these fires have changed Australia. You know, these fires, as I said, this is unprecedented, ladies and gentlemen. You know, these fires spell, and it's hard to say, but these fires spell the end of Australia as we know it. You know, and that may seem like, you know, a radical thing to say. You may think I'm exaggerating or something like that. But look at the devastation to the forests, ladies and gentlemen. We've got something like, the estimates at the moment are 500 million animals have been killed and burned in these fires. Koalas, kangaroos, lizards, just wildlife in general. And it isn't just the animals that have died. The problem is the forests have died because all the insects, all the ants, all the microbes, all the centipedes, all the funguses, all the stuff that keeps the forest alive in the undergrowth, in the mulch, on the ground, on the forest floor, all the stuff that creates the soil, all this is gone. You know, Australia is not going to return to what it was after these fires. And these fires have been deliberately set up. You know, this has been the creation of a perfect firestorm. Everything you could possibly do has been done to create the perfect firestorm in Australia. You know, they've blocked off all our water. They've effectively dried the country out. They've caused so much water mining that the aquifers have ceased to flow on the east coast. If you look at the reports that I've done previously, the last 3 reports, I've shown you very clearly that they've been spraying this country with accelerants, mainly aluminium, barium and strontium, which combined is essentially sparkler dust, and that's why the fires are so outrageous. They've set it up to be a perfect storm, and they're just not doing anything about it. You know, the amount of aid that we're getting for these fires it's just not coming. The government isn't really doing anything about it at all. They're pretending that they are. Sending one ship down to Bateman's Bay, sending one ship down to Mallacoota or Mallacoota, you know, whatever they're doing. I mean, this is too little too late. There's plenty of things they could be doing, but they're just not doing any of them. And as I said, folks, you know, what we're seeing here, we're going to see, you know, like 500 million animals have perished in these fires already. You know, it's not just the people that are suffering. There's so much suffering happening in these fires, ladies and gentlemen, and it's only just begun because summer has only just started. Have a look at this video of this fire truck as well. It's a very interesting video. There's a point in this video where there's an explosion that goes off halfway through the journey. This is 1 minute long. I'm going to show you the whole video. There's a fire truck escaping from the flames. But check this out. And around about, I think, 28 seconds into the video, there's an explosion that goes off in the forest. I mean, I'm open to it perhaps being a ball of sap or a tree trunk exploding, but it's quite a bright white explosion, and I think it's quite interesting. So let's see what you think about this. But this also shows you what the firemen are dealing with these fires, folks. This is like driving to the gates of hell. Check this out.
Watch 38 coming down. Fires on the road already.
Watch this. And then the fire just takes off. You see that? Play that for you again. Try again. You watch the fire spread now. Look at this. Look at that.
Jasper.
What was that, folks?
Jasper, put the blanket up.
It was a very interesting sort of an explosion, and how the fire spread so quickly after that explosion. What do you think might have caused that, ladies and gentlemen? Is that a natural thing that you would normally see in a forest fire? I mean, I don't know. I've never been in a situation like that to be able to answer that question myself, but it seems highly suspect to me. And look at this, folks. If you think the government is actually doing a lot to save the fires and prevent these fires from happening, have a look at this. There's these super scooper aircraft that are all sitting in mothballs overseas. These craft can scoop up water from the lakes, from the ocean, dump it on the fires. Why isn't the government putting this in use? But no, they're just sitting in mothballs while the country burns. And of course, this is what they're blaming it all on, folks. As I mentioned to you, they're going to blame all this on climate change. Australia's angry summer, this is what climate change looks like. As I said to you, they intend to genocide this country, and they've already done a pretty good job, and fire season, summer, has just started. You notice how they've been calling summer fire season for the last few years here in Australia as well, kind of hyping people up, getting them ready for this type of event to happen, getting it in their minds that summer is fire season. But, you know, fires are raging across Australia, more than 5 million hectares. You know, the catastrophic fire season in California saw nearly 740,000 hectares burned. Australia's fire season began this year in late August. Fires have so far claimed 9 lives, blah, blah, blah. Destroyed 1,000 homes. It suggested around 500 million animals have also died, including 30% of the koala population. I would suggest it's actually a lot more than that, folks. Australia's climate has warmed, so they're really pushing the whole climate change thing, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, have a look at this. Hundreds of bushfire victims to get no compensation after their homes are razed to the ground, leaving them to facing a life of destitution. You know why this is, folks? Do you know why? Experts say thousands of New South Wales residents do not insure their homes because state government taxes make it too expensive. And think about this. Why would it be, folks? New South Wales and Tasmania are the only jurisdictions in the country where emergency services are funded by tax on insurance companies. Think about that one. Your insurance is so high in these states because the insurance companies are taxed in order to support the emergency services. So if people aren't insuring their homes, then you don't have funding for emergency services. And, you know, so they've got to put the prices up so less people want to get insurance. And so emergency services get thrown on the back burner. You think that isn't done by design, folks? I mean, they could put the money that they used on the Sydney fireworks display towards funding emergency services, and they would do better than putting a tax on the insurance companies. But if you think that isn't done by design, folks, I mean, that just speaks volumes to me. But yeah, folks, and if you want to know what's going on with these fires and you want to get reports about them, there is also a live blog which refers to the areas around Bateman's Bay and Mallacoota and that area, but you can also find other blogs from around the area through this site as well, folks. So it's just ways of keeping track of things. A lot of people are reporting on these fires. I have found this site, it got sent to me the other day as well. State of the Nation. I'm not sure who runs this site. It's got some good information on it, but it's also got some kind of disinformation on there as well, which is a concern. We've really got to be careful about what information we're spreading, folks. If you look at this fire, this picture here, for example, this is a real picture, and it portrays a lot of the devastation that we're seeing. If you scroll down a little bit, you get down here, and here is that picture again, only it's been enhanced to make it look a lot more flamey than it actually was. There's also pictures here of tornadoes, fire tornadoes that are being, I guess, claimed to be part of these fires. This is actually video footage from fire tornadoes that happened, I think, in Victoria in 2013. So adding these sorts of things to the reports really is a concern. I mean, I haven't read through all of this, but just having those pictures there starts to bring in to question a lot of the other pictures as to whether they are actually from the fires that we're talking about. There's also relevance to California, the California fires, and there's references to directed energy weapons, and there's a claim here of conclusive photographic evidence proving California is under attack by Jews. Yes, we've seen stuff like that, but you know, we've got to be quite careful over what we're pushing and what we're spreading. Oh, there's one of my videos there, look at that. Well, that's nice. But we've got to be very careful about what we're pushing, what we're spreading, and make sure we stick to the facts, you know. And having pictures like these 3 images here really do actually only do damage to the cause, folks. They really do. But as I said, we've got some interesting stuff. We've got, like I showed you before, we've got these radar images which show the rain is being pushed away. Another thing we've got in the Mallacoota area is this particularly interesting graph here, which shows this incredible spike just before the fires happened, where the temperature jumped from about 30 degrees up to 49 degrees. I mean, that's nearly 50 degrees, folks. That's incredibly hot. That is an incredible rush of hot air. I don't know where a rush of hot air like that would come from. You can look at the graph here, and you can see here that it shows you, here's the temperatures. Shows you the temperature there. There's the temperature line, 25, 31, 34, 49, and then back to 36 an hour later. So, you know, in that one period, it jumped up over 20 degrees in the area of Mallacoota. And that's a very interesting thing to have happened as well. So these are the sorts of things we have to take into account, folks. There's every evidence that this is a perfect storm and that this storm has been set up by the government. You know, and I urge you to watch the reports that I've put out to this previously. There's 2 or 3 reports you can find on my YouTube channel, The Crow House, and you'll find links to at least 2 of them below. The last report that I put out, which I think was called, what was it called? It was called Australia Water Deprivation Incendiary Fueled Fires. That's what it was called. And the one before that, it was Drought by Design, the Genociding of Australia. Excuse me, folks. But those are 2 quite important reports that I put out, which do show you how this incendiary mix is made and what they've been doing to our country. I mean, it's just stuff that you need to see and stuff you need to share. But, you know, what we need to do, folks, is to realise that this government is a group of criminals. I mean, they've manufactured this whole situation by design. This is why they disarmed us back in the 1990s. This is why they built that big fence around Parliament House to make sure we couldn't go and storm the building. And this is why they have recently armed our police officers with machine guns and formed the public order response units. Because they've had this plan for a really long time, ladies and gentlemen, and it's important that we pay attention to this. You know, the only way to get out of this situation is to rein these criminals back into control and to release the water that is being held in these private dams, the water that has been illegally sold off to foreign interests, to foreign companies, to these big agribusinesses. And like it was said in that report that I showed you before, people that own millions and millions of gallons of water, millions of acres of water, and they don't even own a scrap of land to use the water on. They're simply using it for fracking, they're using it for their own means and their own uses, but not anything that's helping the country. And this is one of the driest nations on earth, and this simply cannot be tolerated. So we have to find out where these dams are, and we have to release the water from these dams. The problem, of course, is that many of these have been sold to companies like countries such as China. And that's a real problem because, of course, if we go to release any of the water from these dams, China may well view it as an act of terrorism, simply because we're attempting to free water that is rightfully ours. And under the terrorism laws that have been put in place in China, someone informed me today actually, China's terrorism legislation mandates that Chinese nationals who own property in Australia and live here are directed to defend themselves, their property and China in the event of a terror threat to themselves. And this China's terrorism law applies to Chinese in this country as well. So there's every chance that if we do go and release the water, China may view it as an act of terrorism. That could turn out pretty bad as well. But, you know, all of this has been set up by design, folks, and I think that should be pretty obvious to everyone. But the problem is that the situation we are facing here, as I said, spells the end of Australia as we know it. And this cannot be understated. And if there was anything that was going to cause the people of Australia to rise up and be counted, I would hope it is the situation we are now facing. And make no mistake, folks, as I've alluded to on previous reports that I put out, ours isn't the only country that they've been spraying with this incendiary fuel. They do intend to implement their scorched earth policy, and we're seeing it unfold in Australia right now. And it's pretty well over for this country, unfortunately. We could still maybe turn things around if we can get this water released and if enough people wake up to themselves. But, well, it's anybody's guess where we're going to go from this point, ladies and gentlemen. So just please continue to spread this message, and I'll bring you another report as soon as I'm able. Thanks for listening to this one. I'm sorry about the interruptions and the little bits of editing that I had to do at the end of the report here, but I had a couple of Skype calls that were not expected, so that's just the way it goes. Thank you to all the people who write me so many kind emails. Thank you to all the people who support me on Patreon. Thank you to all the people who've supported me through this stance with these fires and this situation we face as well. I can't thank you enough for all that you do for me and for all the support you've shown me over the years. But get ready, folks, get ready for 2020, because we are heading to the next level. This is going to be a big year. I mean, I said at the start of 2019 it was going to be a big year, and we've certainly seen that. But I think we ain't seen nothing yet. So hold on to your hats, folks, and let's see where the ride's going to take us from this point. Thanks for listening. In Lakesh.